And Restaurant Week.
Yes. Calling the meeting of the Solvang Planning Commission to order for February the 4th. First of all, Pledge of Allegiance. Will you please stand? Aaron, do you want to lead it?
Sure. Hand over your heart and repeat with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, everyone. Okay, where is my agenda? Right here. Got too many papers in front of me, excuse me. Okay, first item, does anybody have any public comment for matters not on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none. Are there any requests for continuance, withdrawals, or addition of next agenda items?
No. Nope.
Okay. Conflicts and or ex parte communications to report?
Nope.
Nope. Okay, great. That takes us to the minutes of our last meeting on January 7th. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes?
I didn't see any. I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. That takes us to item 2A, discussion by the Planning Commission regarding 24-hour operations for businesses within the city of Solvang. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Holly Owen, Planning Director, City of Solvang. Here to present the report and to request a recommendation from the Planning Commission. This is a discussion of a proposed ordinance change. It was initially brought to Council January 14th as a draft ordinance, and the ordinance concerned limiting the hours of operation for businesses within the city with recommendations to Council. It was a draft ordinance that was ultimately recommended to come back to Planning Commission for their discussion and consideration. It was initially brought to Council due to neighborhood concerns over a proposed CVS pharmacy in one of the retail spaces at the Mercantile Shopping Centers. Planning staff has no plans at this time that have been submitted by the retail store in question, and there's been no statements that it would be open 24 hours a day, but Council has responded to neighborhood concerns about this possible issue and requested the city attorney to draft an ordinance limiting those hours of operation within the city. Staff did research the issue, and the city attorney did also. We found that there were very few examples to draw from in terms of restrictions of the operations of the businesses like the one proposed. Just as a point of information, the ABC Alcohol Bureau in California restricts alcohol sales between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. So there's no stores that can actually retail alcohol at that time, including anything that would be proposed for that center. It is a use that is allowed by right in the C2 zone. It's a retail use. That does limit, in some ways, what the city can require in terms of conditions. It's not a condition. It's not on the CUP list for the C2 zone. So there really is no need, nor can we require a conditional use permit for that use. Should Planning Commission make a recommendation to restrict the hours of operation, there's several paths you can research and discuss tonight and bring back as a recommendation to Council. One of them would be a restriction by zone, allow perhaps some areas to have 24-hour operations and others not. This is all assuming, too, that current uses will still be allowed to continue. When you start looking more broadly at what constitutes businesses, it can be anything from Buell Fat Rock and their three shifts that they use apparently today in their business model to an ATM, which is open 24 hours. So, one needs to take into consideration what the current uses are and find a way, if possible, to continue allowing those to be to carry on. There also could be a citywide restriction on businesses operating adjacent to residential areas. That was the initial proposal for before council on the 14th of January. And although that in many ways makes logical sense in terms of keeping the residents' concerns addressed, it is a little, maybe a little challenging to implement in certain areas of the city, because there are areas where we are not actually aware of how many residential uses are, let's say, within 500 feet of a business. So that might make it a little challenging for staff to administer. With that, it is a near certainty that we will have more tourism in the TRC. We I think at the State of the City, it was addressed by saying that there was going to be at least 64 new hotel units in town. We will have more people looking for activities in different times of the evening. So that was one of the considerations that came up from a couple of members of the business community. But this is definitely a discussion recommendation, and any direction that you give will come back to council in the form of a recommendation for their consideration. That concludes my staff report. I'm available to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions so far?
Let me just say too, the assistant attorney, city attorney is here to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question. Can the city council, without an ordinance, restrict operating hours of businesses in town?
No. So there has to be a legal mechanism to do so. With a particular, sometimes with a CUP process, you can put a condition of approval in, but just generally, you have to have an ordinance to exercise your police powers.
The ordinance that we have here, that's something you guys drafted, and then city council kind of said, well, let's kick it to planning.
Yes.
Yes.
Although it's not an actual zoning ordinance that was drafted, and so it isn't required to go to the planning commission, the city council decided it would be better policy to go ahead and hear what the planning commission thinks about it before they make a final decision. Yep.
But they've seen this, I'm assuming, the one you guys drafted. Okay, good.
Okay, I think now's the time to go to public comment. I have one request from Hank Holmberg.
Good evening. Thanks for letting me talk here real quick. It was mentioned that Buell Flats, and I know that the 24-hour gas station, those are different kinds of operations in the city. I'm more focused on the retail part of the what the draft of the ordinance would be, and my concerns are twofold. The biggest thing for me is that we live here in the valley and we have incredible night skies, and I think maybe some people take it for granted. I sure don't, but I think it's spectacular. Having lived in Santa Barbara for many years and now living in the valley, I'm just amazed at how lucky we are to have a night sky. And I think if you have a 24-hour operation of a retail shopping center, or CVS as it were, it's going to require lighted parking, lighted signs, and a lighted storefront. That will definitely generate a lot of light pollution going up, especially around those residential homes that are basically 100 feet away. I don't live in that particular area, but I'm not in favor of any more light pollution in the valley. I think if we all look towards Buellton, if you're in Solvang, you can actually see the glare of the light pollution going up, and I would hate to have that happen in Solvang. So that's my main concern about the retail operation of a box store. I think it's a little unusual and possibly, in my opinion, ridiculous to have two drugstores within 100 feet of each other, the way a crow flies, but to have one that's open 24 hours in a demographic or location that only has 6,000 residents seems a little overkill to me. You know, this company, CVS, is owned by pharma, and they have like $380 billion worth of assets. I don't really understand the push for having 3 drugstores within 6 miles of each other. So, but it's coming in and it's going in, and that's fine. But I would definitely like to see some kind of regulation on the hours of retail in that box store capacity. And I was thinking, you know, loosely 10 to 6, which seems reasonable. And then the other part of it is that they will be selling alcohol up until 2 a.m. in the morning. And let's not kid ourselves, that CVS is right between 101 and the casino, which has a lot of late night traffic at that time. And at 1:45, if somebody wants to buy alcohol, or up until that point, they will buy alcohol at CVS. So all the roads going into the valley and out of the valley, 246 and 154, are 2-lane oncoming roads. And anything we can do to, reduce the impact of potential drunk driving or people buying alcohol late at night and driving those roads, to me is a no-brainer. And I'm sure I could probably get the local CHP lieutenant and the lieutenant from the sheriff's department to agree on that. So again, I respect your opinions, and I know you have the well-being of our city, you know, in the forefront of this decision, but I think the light pollution issue is something that we really need to look at. And I don't think we want to look like another community in Southern California with box stores that all look the same in every other parking lot. That's not what Solvang's about. So I respectfully submitted my letter to you both, or to all 3 of you, and we can go from there, I guess. But I thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I don't have any more speaker slips for this. Oh, yes, I do. I'm sorry. Stephanie Statham.
Hello. I'm a Solvang resident. I live actually just a few buildings away from here. And I submitted quickly at, I think it was 5:03, my response on Facebook, and then sent the email here to you guys. And it might come across as being, kind of emotional about it. The idea of what's in my mind. I mean, the look of that corner of the Mercantile, to see it turn from what it used to be, which was I just have to use the word groovy feel to it, had trees, people hung out there quite a bit, and now, it's not finished, the whole area, but I just find myself not all that excited about going over there, because the feeling of it has already changed. It's all The parking spaces are all tight. It's really a cluster catastrophe to me, that whole situation. So, and forgive me, but I'm not too sure of all the proposed businesses that are going in there, or it's a liquor store? No?
No, there's no proposal yet for that space.
Oh, okay. Then I got that wrong. But the lighting, let me just tell you that for me, lighting is really important, and I would hate to see something really bright right there. It would be really offensive. I do hear people, because I'm so close to town, I do hear people walking by my house saying, "Oh my gosh, it's so dark here. They should have more lighting." But thank goodness, for me, we don't. I am going to say I'm sorry to see that there is a second CVS going in there, because I love our Rite Aid. They renovated it, and the people there are so nice. And I'm going to continue to be going to Rite Aid. So my biggest worry is that corner is going to turn into a strip mall kind of thing. We've got really loud, I think you should worry about the traffic going in and out of there also.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry your time is up.
Thank you.
Any further public comment on that topic? Okay, we'll bring it back to council for discussion. Aaron? There was a hand? Oh, Ms. Jameson?
Or down with the mic. I don't know if anybody said this. I'm sorry I'm late. I thought it started at 6:30. Maybe some of you remember, and maybe some of you don't because you didn't live here then, when the CVS and Albertson went in. First off, they were a 24-hour store. They lost their shirt out there, and they changed the time. I think they close at 9 now, 8, 9, something like that. 24-hour things in the San Ynez Valley don't work yet. Maybe when we have 100,000 people here, then it will. I pray that never happens.
Thank you. Okay. Now, council discussion.
I've got a lot of a lot of issues, but I'll get through them quick. First off, to me, this is not a CVS issue. It's a whole city issue. I don't care if it's CVS. I don't care if it's me and I have a restaurant in town or a convenience store on 5th Street that decides to go 24 hours a day. I don't want to see it. And so, I mean, that's out. I'm out. That's how I feel. I don't know how the other folks feel. But it isn't, and it shouldn't be in it. It's improper if we're driven by CVS. And I don't think that people mean that. It came about because there was a rumor, maybe valid, maybe not, that they were going to do a 24-hour pharmacy. No, it's going to be alcohol. No, it's going to be retail, whatever it's going to be. That brought it to our attention going, wow, we don't have an ordinance. That's an interesting thing. I have sat here a long time. It's never been an issue, so I assumed we had something. We don't. I knew that we had something to deal with alcohol because it's an alcohol beverage control licensing issue from 2 until 6 a.m. that you can't go buy alcohol in a bar, a restaurant, or a retail, on-site or to take off-site. So my discussion is going to be on all of it. And I would hate to see a bunch of small shops in town being open late at night with the traffic and the drinking and the noise and the light pollution and everything that was said. And I appreciate the letters that came in. So I feel that way. And I would rather get something passed now before they decide maybe we do want a 24-hour, because there is a 24-hour business in the Valley that's really successful, and that's the casino. So we do have those. We have to be aware of hotels are 24 hours a day. We have the ATMs. We have 2 gas stations. I think down at the Beal Flat one, you can use the card at night like at Jim's. We could have another gas station could come into town and want to be open later with a convenience store like they have out in Buellton. So I want to see an ordinance passed. The ordinance that was drafted, if we focus on this, or maybe that's my comments right now and see where you guys want to go, and if we could, this is a good start, but I think this ordinance needs to be even tighter than it was proposed. But that's my feeling.
Well, actually, I had another idea, and I don't even know if it's feasible. So let me ask our city attorney, and that is, because of the concerns that staff talked about, for example, having in mixed-use areas like the TRC, we have residences, so it'd be really hard to not consider those residents when we're coming up with an ordinance, say that we would say it would be okay in C2 but not elsewhere. And there are some businesses like gas stations that we all would probably want to be open 24 hours just in case. So could we take another approach here and perhaps on a case-by-case basis in the business certificate set out the hours of operation for each individual business?
The short answer would be no.
No, so you can't use
The
a
business
business
certificate is
license.
just we call it a business license. It's not a license, it's a tax. And it predates Prop 218, so it didn't have to go to a vote. But that also partially explains why it's still $50, because if we wanted to increase it, since it's really a tax, then that would have to be on the ballot. And so it'd be kind of expensive to increase. So what the business certificate program, which is kind of what we call it, excuse me, does is it helps us collect information about what's going on. And it helps us provide both fire and police services, so there's good reasons for doing it. But it doesn't regulate businesses. And so we couldn't use that as a way to regulate them either.
Okay.
And
Just to clarify too, it does require planning consideration and approval for zoning, but that is the extent of it.
right, but it doesn't. It's just
But that's just to kind of verify that they use.
that's informational for the person coming in.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, that's right. It's also $34, not 50.
well, I want a refund.
We charged you more, I guess.
Okay, well, that's too bad, because, that way you could consider individually whether a business was going
Right.
to be near a residence, whether it was going to be potentially
that
an
wouldn't-
attractive nuisance, noisy, et cetera.
Yeah, it's just practical experience.
You
Could
can
we write an
You can
ordinance?
pass an ordinance that says every business has to close at 9 p.m. unless you get a CUP. And then we would have a zillion CUPs, and we'd be having hearing after hearing after hearing and trying to determine which business go to 9:30, 9:45, 10:15. Oh, it's a Saturday, it's later, it's a Sunday. That's pretty tough. I mean, it would be really cumbersome in
It would.
town. It would be monumental task.
Well, I'm just worried that trying to write it. Yeah.
monumental task, is my point. That's the only way
that you'd have Right.
to make exceptions.
But I'm also concerned that it's very difficult to write an ordinance that's going to work for everybody, both businesses and residents. I think there could be a lot
I
of
guarantee you
loopholes.
it won't work for everybody.
Yeah.
Because people who don't want to have to comply with it aren't going to like it. And then there will be people who think it's not strict enough. So you aren't, I don't care how good we are at drafting it, nobody's going to achieve perfection. It isn't going to work for everybody. And so you kind of have to decide what your recommendation is on what's the best thing for Solvang to do.
Well, as a Solvang visitor before I moved here, I kind of like the quiet town after 10 o'clock or so at night. And the dark skies are lovely to go out and see the stars at night, and some of the things that the public have already talked about. So if we do put this ordinance in place, I would really like to see it in more restricted hours, something like 6 or 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So with that, I'll.
I read what was in the staff report in the proposed ordinance. One of the things that concerned me was the number of exemptions that were specifically called out. I agree we probably need an ordinance of some kind, but I think we should find a way to word it such that we don't have to enumerate that the ATM is exempted and Mule Flat's exempted and Jim's is exempted and the hospital is exempted and the AMR is exempted, because that can become an endless list as people, as you said, object to, whether it's affecting their business or not. And also, do we have no control at all over people who have ABC licenses? It says they can be open till 2?
Pretty much that has been fully occupied by the state of California. So the shortest answer is we have no control. There's a much longer answer where particular individual alcohol outlets have become nuisances. Then you can establish basically a CUP program, and it's been successfully done on individual instances in Los Angeles and in Oakland, but it's really expensive and time-consuming, but it can be done.
So in the case in point here, which happens to be CVS, if they do decide to serve or sell alcohol and get an ABC license, would we have to allow them to be open till 2 a.m.?
Yes. I think for that purposes, we wouldn't be able to interfere with that aspect of the ABC licensing.
So we say nobody can be open until after 9, they get an ABC license, they can be open till 2. And there's nothing we can do about it.
Right, just like your restaurants.
So the thing that would drive that would be customer base. As Holly pointed out, there are no 24-hour businesses in town, or even in the valley that I know of. So, maybe we can talk about, going back to my original point, talking about businesses that are open, like self-serve gasoline and ATMs, and describe that as a business that does not require an employee on site after a certain time, that those businesses could remain active. That cuts down the number of exemptions, at least to the hospital and AMR. There may be a couple others, but. So I'm not sure how we can address the concern that's in here.
Well, and you have to remember that, just like Aaron said, if you saw me nodding my head up and down while Aaron was speaking, yes, the CVS is what brought the issue to everybody's attention, but we can't draft a rule just to apply to CVS in the one location. That would subject us to a winning lawsuit instead of a losing one. Mm-hmm. We can always get sued, but we don't want to have it be a winning one.
Well, in your draft, I mean, I like a lot of it. You say that the restriction upon business hours imposed by this section shall not apply to business licenses that sell alcohol for on-site.
Well,
Okay,
I would assume Dave did some more particular research than,
which
I
then
did.
handles bars and restaurants, but not retail, which is off-site license. I mean, I have a restaurant, we close at 8 o'clock, I only have an on-site license. I can't sell you a bottle of wine and take it. That's my ABC. So it would handle the retail sale of off-site sales, how you folks drafted it. So we could, even though it's a violation in spirit of the ABC, obviously there's a way to get around that 2 a.m.
So, yeah, Mr. Fleischman drafted that, so I
Okay.
suspect he actually did some particular research
Okay.
on that issue and feels comfortable that he could draw that distinction and
Right.
not be successfully sued.
Right. Well, and there are, I think we would have to make, assuming that we would like an ordinance, which I would like an ordinance, we'd have to make an exception, and there might be a list of exceptions, because every hotel is open 24 hours a day. People check in, people check out, they're leaving, they're going wherever they are. Obviously, it isn't just the gas station, it is, that's one of them, and ATMs, so but these businesses have employees, so it can't just be self-serve businesses. We're gonna have to make an exhaustive list looking at the types of businesses that we allow in our zone, in town, and we're gonna have to say what we're trying to avoid. I mean, the opening paragraph that Dave drafted is that we're passing this ordinance is enacted for the purpose of protecting public interest, health, welfare, and safety, providing a period of quietness, noise, vehicular traffic, I assume lighting, also all those good reasons, and to minimize the opportunity for potential crime activities targeting businesses that are open late at night with less customers and slower police response times. So it's a double. One is for the quiet enjoyment for everybody, and the second is from a safety standpoint, which I think is great. I mean, it kind of covers what everyone is kind of saying. So that to me seems good. We just need to then come up with the hours, those that can operate beyond and those that cannot, and try to come up with our best drafting. It's not going to be done tonight, obviously. Something that Dave did not address is deliveries in here, which deliveries could be an issue also. Deliveries late at night, deliveries early in the morning, noise and things of that nature, which I am sure that residences would feel that that's very intrusive at 2 in the morning or 4 in the morning. So I've got a list of like 8 things that I think we could ferret this out and come up with a little bit a better ordinance that gives the restrictions that I would like to see. I don't think that I wouldn't support one that says 10 o'clock at night. I mean, you got restaurants, and you got all kinds of things that are open past 10. There might even be some gift shops that are open till 10. So I don't know if 10 that's too early for me. The midnight hour is a pretty good one. That's what David come up with, the 6 a.m. to midnight kind of thing, or midnight to 6 a.m. Having to be closed on that same day. I would just want it included with deliveries. I like now we exempt the restaurants because it's on-site versus off-site. Or we can do it through a conditional use permit, business by business by business. And I do like the 500 feet. I don't think 500 feet's that difficult. I have my zoning map, and I look 500 feet. It covers everybody. I mean, on one side or the other, it covers every business is within 500 feet of a residence. So it's going to cover. And the mixed use, Dave put it in as residential zoning. He didn't put it as TRC that has some apartments. It's residential zoning as he set it out. So it covers, the 500 feet covers all that. I don't like the ordinance that Dave drafted where he says under section 3 that the city manager shall determine the eligibility for an exemption with no appeal to anybody. Because I don't necessarily want to trust one person. We don't have one person do hardly anything in this town that can't be appealed to a planning commission or a city council. Because then all you're doing is bringing a lawsuit, and it says it shall be final, which I think is too harsh. Both ways. One, I'm going to shut you down. One, I'm going to allow it because I determine as the city manager that that's okay, that you're exempted from it, even though you're next to an apartment building. And the apartment folks should have the right to appeal that, to get a real hearing, not in front of one person. So again, this is a good start, in my opinion. We just need to tighten it down. And I don't think it's that impossible to do. Heck, we have a design guideline book that's pages upon pages upon pages. It just takes some thought to do this. And it's nice that you folks have come up with at least something to start with. That's always the hard part.
So what's your suggestion? That we
My
come up with a draft, or we?
My suggestion is that if we want, first off, do we want to have an ordinance, or are we voting 2 to 1 that we don't want an ordinance? If we do we want to look at this ordinance and go line by line and come up with some ideas that we think would make it tighter or looser, if that's what we think? And I'm happy to do it tonight, or we can give ideas and have Dave come back with the changes that we agree to. I mean, we're not wordsmiths, you know, we can't put it in the legalese.
So I think the city council asked us to make a recommendation. I don't think they asked us to write a ordinance.
Well, I personally, in the absence of being able to do it with a business license, I would like to have an ordinance for the reasons that Dave stated in his intro, and that is to protect the city, the public health and safety, and so forth, the residents. So I would like to do that, but I just think it's going to be tough to deal with the exceptions in here. What about doing this by zone? What about writing an ordinance for, you know, C2, commercial retail?
Well, but you've got a lot of businesses in TRC, which is not C2, and then we have C3.
C2.
C,
I forget what
C2 is there.
So
C3 is out, is the western end, right?
Yes.
So you've got the TRC, you've got the West, and you've got, what is Mercantile, C2 or
C2.
3? C2.
C2.
So Mercantile, Nielsen's Market, C2. Industrial is going to be the C3. That's where we put the marijuana medical, and then you have the TRC up here,
Okay, so for
tourist-related
the-
commercial.
For C2 and the TRC then.
Sure, and exempt C3 from it. And that's because
Which we'd have
C3
to
is
probably do anyway.
truly just
Yeah.
down below the hill there, which is Buell Flat area. Even though most of Buell Flat's in the county, all of their digging and rock quarries in the county, which we don't
That's why we
really
can't
get to control anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would just include the TRC and the C2, basically our commercial
Do it
districts.
based on zone.
And yeah, and we can always add and do something different later if the city council wanted to expand it into the C3 zone if that's what they felt like they wanted to do. So we could recognize that.
And then as far as granting exemptions, you would want a right of appeal.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I agree with that
Yes, I do
wholeheartedly.
too.
I think it has to be should be the city council that grants exemptions, not the city manager.
Right, or a planning commission with an appeal to city council,
Yeah.
you
that
know,
would- Yeah.
just so that you had another 5 set of eyes on it.
Actually makes more sense to me.
It was a little surprising to me, I must say, that when it was drafted, it gave the city manager that authority, but I didn't consult with Dave while he was crafting it, so there may have been reasons behind that
Well,
I wasn't aware of,
It was the
to
city
concentrate there.
manager that granted exemptions for the business certificates, so I thought maybe Dave picked
Perhaps
that up and made
with
that
consistency with that,
consistent, yeah.
perhaps that was, yeah, I'm not entirely certain of that, so
But I
I
think the
probably should have
planning
asked that.
department makes more sense than either the city council or the city manager. What do you think?
Right. Yeah, I think so too. And then they can always appeal anything that we do to city council, and that could be a neighbor who says it's not restrictive enough, and why did you grant the exception? And they get to come to these meetings because they'll be notified, and we're granting an exception to be open, 24 hours a day.
So just to review where we're at, we agree that an ordinance is required. We agree that that looking at that restriction by zone would be appropriate. Just to reiterate, it was a C2 restriction
C2 and
As proposed?
TRC.
TRC.
and TRC.
Yes, only C3 not.
Yeah, we might be safer from a drafting perspective to just list C3 as an exemption
Absolutely.
and keep it out of the zoning code and keep it in chapter 6,
Mm-hmm.
which is where we have our basic police regulations.
That's fine. Yep, that works.
So C3 as the exemption to the ordinance that would limit the hours of operation.
Now, one more thing, could we limit the hours of operation a little more tightly if we said in the ordinance that for businesses that have on-site licensed for on-site consumption of alcohol, they could follow their ABC license.
That's what he does say.
Okay.
Do you have what he drafted, right?
Yeah, I
The
just
D.
couldn't find it. Okay.
Under his D, he says a restriction upon business hours imposed by this shall not
Right.
apply.
Right, but could we say not have, I mean, he starts with 12 midnight. I don't know of any businesses that are open that late other than restaurants and bars.
I
I mean,
think you're
couldn't we
correct.
say 10
I think
o'clock?
you're right.
I think you're correct.
Well, what about AMR in the hospital?
We'd have to exempt the hospital for sure, because again, the hospital's not in our C3, I think it's institutional zone, the hospital?
Yeah,
If I looked at that map, PO, professional, is it?
It's
Institutional.
institutional.
Where's
It's
AMR?
institutional. AMR is TRC. AMR is at the top of Old Mill Road, Pine Street. So, and so we could make an exception for fire, police, emergency services, public safety, I mean, that
Right.
seems
Rather than
easy, rather than
specific
specific, because you could
businesses.
have a different AMR. It could go away and something else comes in, or they move to a
Right.
different one, something like that.
That's
That's a
what
good
my
idea.
original thing was.
Yeah.
that we find some way to do that,
Lump them in that way, yes.
broader categories rather than specific businesses.
Well, and then I would like to see that everything needs to close by 2 a.m., no matter what.
Everything closed by 10 a.m.
I believe me, I'm with you.
And since most,
But they're open, ABC allows that on-site sale, and you have bars and you've got all these restaurants that we're never gonna go to 10. We're probably not, we can't even go to midnight, I can't imagine. We'd have an upheaval, but they all close by 2 because they can't legally sell alcohol. Why the heck's a bar open past 2? So by stating it, you're just stating what the ABC already states, and they're not gonna grumble. You take an hour of their time from the Mandarin Touch, and Phil's gonna be very irritated, and rightfully so.
And there are several other businesses, not only existing but proposed. There's one other business that's proposed that would like to have concerts occasionally, and they have the ABC license until 2 o'clock.
yeah, but what I was suggesting was that the ordinance say, hours of operation for these zones would be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., and then the exemptions would be the ones we talked about, and any business that had an ABC license, which can stay open later.
Gotcha. So say the blanketed statement is the 10 p.m.
Right.
with the exception of C3 is exempted on the big, so with the exception of these health, safety things, the restaurant food operations that have on-site licenses by the ABC. Okay,
I think I heard public comment to that effect too.
But
10 is good enough.
But there's a problem with that, in that there could be a restaurant that opens in town that doesn't have an ABC license, because they don't want to sell beer or wine or any hard alcohol, and we're making them close at 10. Next door, you mean, if I got an ABC license, I could be open later? Okay, so that's, you can't do that. Obviously, you're going to force them to get an ABC license and pay $1,500 and $500 a year to renew it, just so they can stay open like the restaurant right next door.
If they could get an ABC license.
And what if they couldn't get an ABC, or didn't want one for religious reasons, or whatever
Yeah,
the
sure.
reason that they, ethics, or they wanted to have a coffee shop that was stayed open later? How come the place next door is selling booze can and I can't?
Yeah.
So 10's pretty early is my point.
So you hit on something earlier in your comments, that why not just set up the time the same as what the ABC is
For all businesses?
for all businesses, and let the consumers decide.
Because what shop would be open past 10
Right, I
o'clock
mean,
at night
yeah.
or midnight anyway?
Right. It would eliminate the 24-hour.
Right. Right. I know it's it's tough.
I'd rather have some, I don't know. I mean, we have all the, from 10 to midnight, we still have all the issues of lighting, noise, all of that,
We still
we're
have
trying to
a dark
avoid.
sky compliant requirement for all projects. And I would imagine that a parking lot, for security reasons, will not ever go dark, even if the stores are closed. I would have to research that, but that would be my guess, is that they need to be dark sky compliant, and I think we all agree that that's highly valued here in the Valley. But that said, when there are businesses there for personal safety reasons, I think that it's important to make sure that there's adequate parking lighting and approach lighting
Right.
to businesses too. So
Yeah, especially in the TRC where there are people living above businesses. And I mean, if we forced everybody to turn out their lights at 9 o'clock at night, first of all, I don't think that'd be very tourist friendly.
Right. Well, yeah. I don't know. It's gonna take, I don't know. I mean, the 2 a.m. seems awfully late to allow stores to be open. I see where you're going, Jack. How do we allow a restaurant or a bar to be open till 2, but not a retail outlet that is maybe quieter than a bar
Right.
and a restaurant? And because that's their business model. They only want to be open in the evenings, and how come they can and we can't? I suppose it's defensible. I really don't know how it's defensible. When you're saying that it's all for public safety and for noise compliance and everything else, and part of it is the late at night crime and but you're going to allow these guys to be able to do it because they have an ABC license.
Yeah, well, we blame it on the state.
Yeah.
So it does become defensible as far as our ordinance goes, and the state has just carved out an exemption that has stood challenge after challenge, so.
Add more teeth.
Right, so I would just, I mean, that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do.
Right.
That's what you guys get to decide what to recommend, is what you think the right thing to do is. And so you could pick, Dave happened to put 12 to 6, which is different than 2 to 6.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously he felt that was defensible.
Mm-hmm.
So equally defensible would be picking 10 p.m. instead of 12 a.m. But that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do, and that's something you want to accomplish too.
Right.
Well, we need to make a recommendation, I guess. I'm in favor of shorter hours. I think I'm hearing, we have agreement from you two that you want to make it 2 a.m.
Well, 2 a.m. when it comes to the on-site sale of consumption, not sale, on-site consumption of alcohol, I'm okay with, as Dave wrote it, not the off-site sale of alcohol, because that would be considered retail, even though ABC says they can
His
do it.
current time would be 12
Yes.
for the, if you're not exempted, you got to shut down at 12 and you can't open up till 6,
Yes.
as currently drafted.
You would like to see 10.
I would like to see 10.
I
As it
I know.
deals with, the sale of liquor, for example, at a CVS, which they have yet to ask to do, but
Right. What's your feeling on time?
You know, I look around town, and maybe we've got a answer in search of a question here. One of the biggest complaints, and you probably get it too in your store, is that there's nothing to do in town after 6 or 8 o'clock at night because everything's closed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got
not shopping.
one's a smart aleck comment, which I will make, but the first thing I'm going to say is, we laughingly call them permanent ordinances to separate them in our legal brains from merely temporary ordinances. They're all temporary, because a permanent ordinance can be changed as many times as you want to change it. So let's assume the council accepts the recommendation that we're going to have an ordinance. They're going to pick a time, and you should make your recommendation. Well, if it turns out in practice that, by God, whatever the first time we picked isn't really working as well as it should. It should either be earlier, it should be later. Council can change it. So it's,
Yes, but the problem becomes if we make it more restrictive, other people are grandfathered in. So if we have an ordinance and somebody comes in and rents and opens and they're open till midnight and then council says, boy, 10 is better, that person, everyone is exempted because you bought your business, bought your piece of property, did your thing under that law. Unless I'm incorrect, and you could come in and pass an ordinance and make sure now that everything has to be closed. I don't know that answer.
Retroactive, you mean?
Yeah, I don't know if you can do that or not without subject your. I know you could certainly make it later, you know, but to make it more restrictive later, I don't know if that's easy to do. That's more of a legal question. So that's where Gay's coming from, is make it restrictive so that we can always loosen it if we want to, but going the other way is harder. That's tough. So the 10 o'clock could be the recommendation. Let City Council figure if they want 10 or throw a dart on a wall and go 10:30 or whatever they want.
11 or whatever,
or
yeah.
11 or whatever.
Or
But
7
at least it's more restrictive and it can always be loosened.
Yeah.
Is that what you're kind of thinking?
Yes. And one other thing I wanted to point out, you were concerned earlier about deliveries.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like most big noisy deliveries are dealt with in conditional use permits, conditions of use that say you can't have deliveries before 7 a.m. and things like that. That's been my experience in the
If you
last
have
4
to
years.
get a permit.
Yeah, now, are there businesses here that, downtown, for example, that get early morning deliveries? I don't
I'll
have a
guarantee you
clue.
the hotels do.
Sure,
Hotels,
sure. They get
okay.
linen, they get food, they get things like that. It can. I don't know many of them. I'm up and about, and there's not many, but they are, you know, the special occasions perhaps. But I know that when the Union Bank building, you know, is trying to be leased out, the big concern with the Mission is, of course, deliveries and time of operation right next to the cemetery and the historical nature and the Sundays and all those kind of things. It hasn't been a concern because it was a bank, but of course that's a very sensitive area right there. So the deliveries, I'd like to see, if we're saying operations, I would also say deliveries. Why not just put deliveries in there? And again, that can be taken away at a later time if we find that, man, people need deliveries at midnight. I don't think it happens much either, but why not put it in there? Because you can't take it away once, you know, you don't.
So,
Just to be clear, you're recommending then an exemption for deliveries, or you're recommending that the deliveries would fall into this
Yeah,
window
hours
of a restriction?
Correct.
I will say that, and from the planning director's perspective, I have not been aware of any complaints about noise associated with deliveries in the TRC, but that just may be because I haven't been aware of it, or I think that
But my point is, if we're doing this, why not throw deliveries in there? Doesn't hurt, because maybe the next guy that opens, we're getting bigger and larger, as some folks in the audience said, they call them box stores. I don't know if CVS falls into that or not, but we're getting outside money folks coming in, buying hotels, developing restaurants, things. They're used to doing things a different way, much like the audience was saying with the CVS, and they're big corporations, and that takes the charm away from the residents in town immensely. So why not just put deliveries in there is my point. I agree with you. I don't know of any complaints either.
Okay.
And you know, and I rent to 40 places, but it could be.
okay, in that case, then I would say 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. would be my
And-
recommended hours of operation.
And 7 a.m. is tough because you have bakeries. You got Paul's Pancake House, I think, is open before
You've
that.
got Solvang Restaurant.
You got Solvang Restaurant.
You've got people who have insomnia that want a cup of coffee at
Yeah,
6, or
6
want or have something where they want to grab something a little bit
True.
before they hit the road and try to get to where they need to
Quite
work.
frankly, people need to be up by 6 a.m. anyway. Get the day started.
No, they don't.
I think
What
so
about-
too, Aaron.
so let-
I'm old enough. I get up early.
So what happens then if we do deliveries, are allowed earlier? What happens to those areas like the Mercantile where we don't allow deliveries until a certain hour?
Well, they went through, they have
It
restrictions.
wouldn't change those.
They went, yeah, it would not.
So we would probably have to put something in the ordinance then that says then unless the conditions of use.
You know, I'm not familiar with the delivery hours. I know there's conditions of approval, of course, for the overall project, and I don't recall when or if delivery hours were mentioned.
I would think they
I would
were.
have to get back with you on that.
I'm pretty sure they were. I
I'm
know
sure
they were during the construction period, but
Right.
And I also think, because it was such a big issue with the neighbors, I think it was.
Right. So my feeling is that hopefully has been handled fairly successfully, because we've heard a number of comments from residents, but I can't say that I've actually heard anything about delivery noise.
But their conditions of approval supersede
Yes.
and are stronger
Yes.
than this, and therefore
Exactly.
they're fine.
Okay, as long as that's clear.
I, it-
Or that the
Yeah, I think what Holly's saying is she doesn't remember if the conditions of approval related just to hours of construction and construction-related delivery, or were operational
Or
for
operational,
afterwards. I don't
right.
think they were operational, but
I thought so too, but I could be wrong. But anyway, if it's more restrictive, it's more restrictive.
Yeah.
That's the way it goes. And, you know, I mean, we can certainly put a line in there that says, unless you had other restrictions through conditions of approval that are more restrictive, then they're more restrictive.
I would
Yeah.
actually do that.
Just to remind folks of that, that's fine.
Okay. Do you have everything you need?
Can we make a summary, please, then? From what I have, we have obviously yes to an ordinance. We have the C3 zone as an exception to this ordinance, which would make it easier, according to Roy, to
C3 and I think we said.
C3 and
I don't know if it's because we're talking safety, public safety, because again, AMR is not in an I zone, it's in a TRC zone.
Right.
C3I and
Public safety.
public safety.
and public safety uses throughout,
Yeah.
but maybe other public.
Ambulance, fire.
Sheriff's got to be able to
Making
stay open
this
all
exception
night.
for AMR, I think at this point in time, that's what we're talking about, right? Okay. And then the approval of exceptions was to be determined by planning commission,
Planning
Hearing?
department with right of appeal to,
planning department or planning commission? I missed which.
oh, you think it's coming to the commission?
The commission, I
Commission.
think, is what we talked about.
Planning
Commission.
then.
With right of appeal as anything else to
The
the city council.
And finally, hours 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Except for,
Except
and this is
for-
where the exceptions have to be listed, the hotels, and we have to list them. I mean, we just have to list them by use. And we're just gonna have to do that and let the chips fall where they may. But it would be hotels and it would be service stations, as he wrote it. They can be open for gas, but not for repairing of cars. I mean, Dave wrote that pretty significantly tight. ATMs, because there's a couple in town, 3 or 4 or something. I mean, Robbo's, but yeah, they're all over. And then it was also the food operations have the exception to the 2 a.m. Is that what it is? If they have a license only?
I don't know, that's a good question. If they can sell alcohol till 2 a.m. on site, can they also serve food until 2 a.m.?
My understanding is that is usually the case. If it's in their ABC license, that they are. Yeah, some of them
Yeah.
are required. It's sort of a,
Yes.
you know, have a
Otherwise,
little
you're a
bit of
bar.
something
If
to
you're not a
eat while
bar,
you're
yeah,
drinking.
then you got to get a different type of license, yes.
Okay.
Well,
Better
and
with the ABC
That's true. The
license.
places that
On-site
are open till
consumption.
2 right now all serve food.
Right,
Right.
right. Okay, so then that's the exception. So it's the hotels, it's that ABC license thing, it's the public safety, blah, blah, blah. It's the C3. What else? Yeah, hospital, of course, public safety, hospital, emergency services. I mean, it's also you guys. You got sewer, water, something breaks up with chainsaws. I mean, that's emergency
emergency.
services for the city employees,
Right.
Obviously.
That would fall under public safety in my.
Yeah.
So public safety and emergency
Yeah.
services.
So is that enough for Dave to kind of come up, and then it's going to have to be looked at again and tweaked, and, you know, that's kind of what you got to do.
Okay.
Now, I do want to tell my slightly snarky story.
Oh, wait,
because-
one more thing. This application for exemption that he wrote, it talks about businesses that were not in existence at the time of the enactment can ask for an exemption. Okay?
Yes.
So businesses that were not in, that weren't in business, they can ask for an exemption under this process. What if it is a business that is in existence currently, but they want to expand their hours and get an ABC license? So obviously, we can't be that restrictive. You have to be brand new, and then you can ask for exemption. But all of you can't ask for an exemption if you change. So just remind Dave, he's got to just do it both ways.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now you can be snarky.
So I did not have a white beard or white hair when I started here. After my, and I used to spend the night after council meetings and attend staff meetings in the mornings for years. My very first morning here, as I'm walking into City Hall, the phone call comes in, and a citizen was complaining because somebody was riding the Surrey after 5 and laughing. So times have changed. You reminded me of that when you're talking about it. That might not be the same way 20 years from now. Yeah.
Right.
Times have changed.
Okay, that's all. Moving on, item 2B. Discussion by the Planning Commission regarding potential combination of Planning Commission and Board of Architectural Review. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Holly Owen, Planning Director, City of Solvang. This is our second item of the evening involving a discussion as part of a recommendation from Council. The recommendation is that after a discussion or review of these materials, there will be a recommendation that staff will bring back to Council. We will have a little change to the discussion in terms of the role of the council members. There were several that were recommended to be in attendance tonight, but on further discussion, they've determined that what they would prefer is that at the end of this discussion, that one of you be appointed to bring back your recommendations and meet with them regarding this issue and continue the discussion as they want to. They want to make it a priority for the next council meeting and move forward with ideally either taking a recommendation, either combining the boards, putting in a couple of colleagues of yours to fill out the Planning Commission, or whatever your recommendations may be tonight. But the nexus of the discussion here would then be brought to that meeting. So at the end of this, please determine which amongst yourselves would be that candidate and meet with the two council members who are involved in this consideration. So just a little background. I think I learned a little bit doing the staff report. I didn't really know that Planning Commission was established in 1987. That's 2 years after we became a city. I think you are all fairly familiar with the roles of Planning Commission. Sometimes there are recommendations and things are passed on to council. That's zoning ordinance text amendments, general plan amendments. Sometimes things stop with you. Conditional use permits. I believe lot line adjustments. Variances. I don't believe variances. We don't do too many variances, but they do stop with you too. So that is part of the Planning Commission role, and then the Board of Architectural Review has their own set of tasks. I think you can see in the staff report how many times the BAR meets. As opposed to the Planning Commission. There's reasons for that. Your tasks are at a larger level in terms of a project approval, in terms of shaping recommendations for policy change in the city. But BAR is very important in terms of the day-to-day tasks, in terms of their approval for how we honor what we have in the design guidelines, and we have a community design element to our general plan. This is quite unusual, actually. Most cities have seven have 7 elements of the general plan, and we are unique as we have the community design element. What that says, I think, to us as a city is that Solvang is design heavy versus a design neutral city. That's part of our brand, and that's certainly part of what we sell as a tourism attraction. I think we're all very aware of that as we spend time during the day in our city and what attracts people. And you can see in interviews, well, for people who come here, what do they like about the Solvang experience. So with that was why the Board of Architectural Review takes a fairly strong role as they do here in the city. That said, it's always good to review what different boards do and what our roles are, and if there's efficiencies that can be gained, or if there's unintended consequences that we can predict. So at the City Council meeting January 14th, they did request that this item combining the planning, the potential combining planning commission and the BAR be brought to Planning Commission for consideration and a recommendation. So that is what you are tasked with tonight. And I know that there are some people in the audience that wish to make some comments. This will, my understanding is this will come back to Council as soon as possible for a final decision and a recommendation for action. You have a fairly lengthy set of attachments here. Some of these were proposed by Dave Fleischman. So you probably read what the alternatives are, and then with that, I would recommend that I'm here to answer any questions, and that the discussion is in your hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Real quick, on the design element, or general plan design element, I didn't bring mine. I meant to. Does it call out a BAR? Calls
Yes.
out an architecture board, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify. It wasn't just, design is it also establishes a Board of Architecture review, I believe. So if we were to change, would it take an amendment or a change to the BAR or to our general plan, or is it just by making it a combined Planning Commission BAR good enough, meets our general plan
All kinds of
in spirit?
I think legally it would meet the general plan if the BAR became part of the Planning Commission. You still have a BAR, just like some cities. The City Council sits as City Council and Planning Commission, so that complies with the law. So I think it would do that. Additionally, it's not one of the mandatory elements, and so the same consistency rules don't apply. Lastly, charter cities don't actually legally have to comply with the same consistency rules as general law cities. We generally don't want to wave that big target out there for people looking for chances to sue charter cities, but in actuality, a charter city doesn't have to do that.
Okay, so it would be legal to make this change, but
And
that's not
legal's
to
the minimum
say
standard.
there's a ton of ordinances and sections of the general plan, et cetera, that would need to be changed.
Or you just wave the magic wand and says every time it says BAR, it actually means Planning Commission sitting as BAR.
Really? Okay. All right, public comment. I have 2 speaker slips somewhere. First is Brian Nelson.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. I'm an architect who works in the city of Solvang. I have a couple of questions, and then I have a couple of statements. What precipitated this whole idea of combining the two?
I believe it was a city council idea.
There,
I don't
was
know.
there was something like CVS was coming in for that type thing? Okay.
I mean, my understanding is there are folks that have become elected who believe that we need to, and rightfully so, become more efficient in our town. Looking at all government things, looking at all processes, looking at everything. So is this something that is more efficient to only have one board than have an attorney at this one and not have an attorney at the BAR, staff time, blah, blah, blah? Or is it less efficient to have 7 members instead of 5, or 5 people looking at it, or longer meetings because we'd be doing this, and 7 signs tonight also? So I think it's an efficiency study discussion that started it.
Okay, thank you. I see there's 2 sides. There's the planning side and there's the aesthetic side. And I see those as 2 separate things. That's why I think boards of architecture review work well. They work with clients, such as myself and my clients, and go through all the aesthetic things and then bring it to the planning commission as an approved project for aesthetics. And then the planning commission can deal with all the details about planning. So also, I don't know, I haven't talked to the staff enough to know if a project came and just wanted to be heard as a Board of Architecture review, Planning Commission would be the Board of Architecture review this evening. Do you have to bring all of the drawings for the Planning Commission at the same time? Or can you just come in and say, I want a conceptual review of the architecture? Because that's really important that you have, without finishing a set of drawings to the completeness, to bring in a preliminary design and say, what do you think? So that's one of my concerns. And then if it's just coming to if we can just come to the Board of Architecture review, are we going to have to notice all the neighbors around as if it's a planning commission meeting? So that's another question. And I think that's all I have. I just see them as 2 separate things. And I think even though it may not be efficient, I think it's a good thing to have a Board of Architecture review and Planning Commission as separate. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Joan Jemison.
Okay, since 1986, I have been dealing with the county's planning commission and the county's, what was BAR, now it's CBAR, because we've divided them up. There is a world of difference in how those people think. The planning commission is very methodical. They look at things. They have this huge book that they have to make sure that these plans adapt to that book. BAR is like, I'm coming to you, and we're going to stand around this table, and we're talking about the sign, or we're talking about the design of the building. Much more casual. There's a lot of give and take. It's not like you have to do a huge presentation. I think it would be a major, major mistake to combine them. I don't think you're going to save any money. I think people like Brian here would be sitting at Planning Commission waiting for his sign to be approved. It's not efficient. So I would encourage you not to combine them. There are 3 people sitting in this room right now that worked on the last sign ordinance. Aaron, John Rasmussen, and David Rasmussen, sorry. Oh. And Susan. They know how long it took to write that thing, and they're expected to do that now, too. as is the Planning Commission expected to go through and do the general plan updates. You guys are going to be on overload. Forget it. Don't do it. It's not worth it. And it's not going to save you one penny. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Let's get David Rasmussen. He was up first, and then you can go next.
Hi, David Rasmussen, Solvang. I'd encourage you to keep the two boards separate. They've worked well since 1987. They have two different functions, and if you're looking for efficiencies, I think there are other places we can find efficiencies. Maybe we'll look at California Code Check and how that interface is with the city. So keep them separate.
Thank you. And you're next. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Yeah, Brian, 805 Signs. We're in Buellton.
What's your last name?
Schneider. Yeah, you're welcome. So our process, we've been making signs since 2010, so we're pushing 9 years now. And the way we work with Solvang is we work with Brenda, Diane, whoever's in planning at that time, and it is very efficient in my opinion. If we were to change that, the efficiency would happen to us where we'd have to bill more to people to come to this meeting, more intense packet, more time sitting here to do something that can take us 5 minutes sometimes, because we can be very efficient when we come to the meeting. If we have to come onto this big level, it's going to put more stress on us and our clients to want to go through the process. It just makes everything much harder. So right now, it's been nice where we can call planning, call Brenda, discuss our concepts, or come in and do things very, briefly over the counter. Same with Buellton. It's you go in and you talk to the planning gals, and they help you, and it takes you, maybe you get approval in a couple days. There isn't planning commission unless you want to do something way out of their ordinance. So it's actually very simple. So here, we really like the sign ordinance, that it gives us a guide. So my thing is, I agree with Mr. Rasmussen, is the sign ordinance needs to be overhauled again, look at some things, fix inconsistencies, fix some of the definitions that are there. Over the years, we've seen a lot of different issues where people come to us and they get upset because we basically tell them what the city of Solvang allows and doesn't, and they don't understand why. So I'd like to see something better, and I could be a part of it, to say, this is how that sign needs to be built. This is what they allow, this is what they don't. Here's the page, and these pages are all consistent with one another. Because I know I talked with Aaron about it, 8 years ago when that ordinance was overhauled the first time. So from my perspective, if we have to come to Planning Commission every 2 months, our clients want their signs in 2 weeks. Right now, we're limited to monthly meetings, and then it takes us 3 to 4 weeks to make the high-end signs that are required in Solvang. So you're really putting it behind. They could wait 3-4 months to make a sign, and then a huge upfront cost. It could cost them $1,000 in permitting before they can even have a sign made, and they're trying to get into a storefront and open, and how long that process can be. So I'm against having it combined. I think chain of command, it's really nice to come in, sit with the gals at the counter, go over concepts, and then go right through planning, and it goes fairly simple if you know what you're doing. So to take that process and make it so we have to come to this level, maybe show a lot more details about our signs, more details about the architecture, it would be a much longer, tedious process on everyone else's end. So I think it'd take more time on our end than maybe shorter for you. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Susan Bott. I know, I saw her, thanks. I saw that one at that time.
Mine's simple. I just want to get counted on with everybody else. I'm
Okay.
opposed to combining these.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, come up.
Hi, I'm Lorraine from Valley Sign Company, and I've been in the Valley here for 30 years, so I've seen when we moved to the Valley, the first sign ordinance had just been passed. So I've seen it go from a very simple $40 fee over the counter, pretty much a handshake and you were good. So seen that evolve. I am not in favor of combining these things. I agree, I don't think it's going to be more efficient. I think that the way it operates now is a very friendly, even layperson friendly, which I think is important, that some people should be able to, the business owner should be able to come in and acquire his permit. I don't think it's rocket science. There are a couple of big concerns, and one would be a combined agenda where we would be sitting behind large housing projects waiting for a sign that quite often takes 5 minutes before the BAR to get approved, and we're on our way. I would actually like to see some of these signs be able to be approved over the counter, because I do think there is a number of signs that are so right with where they need to be with the ordinance that why not, there's your efficiency. Why not streamline that? Why not be able to trust your planning, the city manager, the planning at city level here, and get going on it? Because, yeah, it is hard to explain to a new shop owner how they may be a month before they're even coming to the sign committee, to the BAR, and then the fabrication process after that. So that makes it very hard on them. We can get temporary signs, but there's also a permitting process for that. So as far as efficiency, I think there are a lot of things that can be handled on even a much more streamlined level. One of the things I was very concerned about hearing this was the financial impact that you're going to place on the business owner, because $150, I mean, originally it was $40, and that was cheap. $150 seems like something that's doable to most business owners. If you went to the county, you have $1,500 just to get on the agenda. That's the conditional use permit. Some of these signs don't even cost that. So it's pretty hard to explain to a business owner how their permitting process is going to cost way more than the sign. And I know that most business owners, you know, they're on a tight budget and they're on a tighter time frame. They need to get open. They need to start making money and stop spending so much. One of the things that's always been nice about the BAR is it's always been kind of a workshop environment. That, yeah, sometimes we come in with something and there's something that is that a timer?
Yes.
Oh, am I
You
done?
can finish your sentence.
Okay. That we could hammer out details right here and now and not have people come back and do a continuance. I think that's rather unfair. So I think if we can keep it layman friendly, keep a workshop environment, reduce or maintain the financial impact that it is now, and try to keep the agenda where we are and not behind big projects, that would be where I would like to see it go. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Take it back to the Planning Commission. Who would like to start?
I'm opposed to splitting the two for a lot of the reasons that came up tonight. If you were at the city council meeting where they discussed this, I don't know, 5 or 6 people, maybe more, spoke. There was not a single person who spoke in favor of splitting it. And honestly, I haven't heard anything from the city council that gives an explanation to me of why they want to do this. It's something they say they want to do. Why, you know, they haven't done any study on it. They've given no numbers to support a position of doing this. And everything I've heard and read says that the customer base for the city is going to be impacted. The commissioners, whether it's 5 or 7, or, you know, the mix of people is going to have to change. Meetings are going to get longer. I think it's just a bad idea. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've kicked it around now for a few months only because it came up during the election, you know, again, the efficiency. And so, you know, I'm not one to fault anyone for looking at efficiency. I think we need to. I think it's good to have self-examination. I think it's good that we look at our sign ordinance, as that's coming up now in our design guidelines and our sign ordinance. It's a healthy thing to do every 7 or 8 years, as long as 8 years ago, I guess it was, because there are some inconsistencies and we can make it more efficient. I'm with Lorraine. There's some signs that probably should be able to, if business moves across the street or down the way and you're using the same colors, the same signs, and as long as staff measures and goes, yes, you have enough frontage to have X amount of square footage, that's an objective decision. Move the darn signs. Why would you have to come in? And I know some people have moved them. It's not staff's fault. They moved them, and then they got letters, you got to come in. Staff's just enforcing what they're supposed to enforce. We need to look at that. There's a lot of efficiencies that we can do that way. I like the idea of having, 10 sets of eyes on projects. I don't see a lot of projects that the complaint was out there that you go to BAR, you get conceptual, you come to planning, we make a change, we make you go back to BAR. I was on BAR 8 years. I've been on planning probably 8 years. I've seen that happen never, I don't think. I've seen it happen with conceptual ideas, but that's when they're just saying, what do you think about my colors? I remember the Margaret Sy project on Alicel, and it came this way and then that way, But that's because it came out Spanish with a turret. I mean, it was an obvious thing that we were like, what? And BAR was what? So I don't see that being a big issue of a ping pong going back and forth. If it does happen, so we could look at efficiency there. If it came up and you came to BAR, then it came to us and we changed it, you should be able to fast track that to the very next BAR and to the top of the list. Because if we're the ones that made the changes, after your architect and designer came up with it, then why not put you at the top of the Disneyland fast track and help that person? Not, oh, I missed the deadline, I got to wait another 6 weeks. There's some fine tweaking that I think that we could do pretty easily. I just want to make sure I've got all the things. I like the things that the gentleman who's the architect said about, do you bring the whole packet or not? Do you notice everybody then or not? Brian saying the same thing. Lorraine saying the same thing. I've been in front of BAR many times on many projects, and you're right. You sit around the table, you talk, and somebody goes, I like that yellow, but could you make it a little less bright? Or we were painting a building once, and we just did it right then and there. We didn't have to go away and come back with new palette things. We just came up with it. So in my mind, I think it's fine as it is. I don't see any reason to change it. I think it could be less efficient in combining them together. And you'd have tough time maybe getting 7 people at once. If it was 7, sit here for those long meetings. Divide and conquer and keep one very artistic and keep one very objective. So that's how I feel.
Well, thank you. I pretty much agree with everything that everyone said. I know the function and responsibilities of the two boards are very different. They don't overlap. In the 4 years I've been on the Planning Commission, there's only one situation where a conceptual design review was asked of the Planning Commission. That's not a requirement. That's an optional request that a developer can make. If there is a situation where both boards are asked to do a conceptual design review, then I don't see any reason why we couldn't have a combined meeting, but I don't think that justifies combining both boards, forever. I also don't see, in that one situation, if we had a combined meeting where it was appropriate, staff time would be saved. I think that's about all, though. As far as other potential savings, I really don't see where those would come into being. There's a lot more expense associated with a planning commission meeting, and a combined board would have to do those things that would be required if it was planning commission only. So there would be more attorney time. There would be more staff time. There would be time for videotaping and broadcasting the meeting to the public. So those are all going to be additional costs. And then the new combined commissioners or board members would have to be trained, and there's quite a bit to learn for each of the two functions. And there's things like the Planning Commissioners Academy, which, by the way, is coming up. It's more expensive than it used to be as well. So that's a lot of additional cost to the city. So I'm not seeing the possibility of any cost-saving efficiencies here. I agree with Aaron that there are probably some things that could be done with the design guidelines and the sign ordinance and things like that that could maybe make it more efficient. But other than that, I think we should keep the two boards separate. That would be my recommendation as well. So I think we're all in agreement.
Thank you.
You don't need a motion or anything.
No motion is made. We do need to nominate amongst you a spokesperson to meet with the council members per their request. So they will reach out to you, but if you want to discuss amongst yourselves whom that might be and your availability, I believe that this item is going to be fast-tracked to get it before council and to move ahead with whatever recommendation, whatever action they wish to take at this point. So I don't think it's going to be quite. I have to write the staff reports. I don't think that will be. I don't think that's possible, but I'll do my best. I'll speed write.
It's tough, this process right now, because there is only 3 of us, because 2 of them are on city council now, as
Exactly.
we know. So, I almost thought maybe we ought to wait till we get a full 5 to make that decision to combine or not, but it came now, and so we're going to do the best we can, and maybe the outcome would be different, or maybe it wouldn't be. All 3 of us might not even be on the new planning commission. Who knows? Or maybe we don't want to be on it at all. I don't even know how people
True
feel.
that. So
Did one of you want to meet with the folks? It doesn't matter.
I'd nominate Gay to do that.
Acting chairperson.
Yeah.
I agree.
will you accept if you are nominated?
Do you accept
There
the
you go.
nomination?
Thank you.
Let's see. I can talk to staff, but I can't talk to both of them, so I'm getting prepared for that, correct? All right.
Listen to the
We're gonna start
recordings.
talking, that's the safest thing to do. And then, other than that, we start getting where we talked about, angels dancing on the head of a pin. Because some parts of the Brown Act refer to quorum, some refer to members and majority, and you don't know if they use the different words on purpose, meaning different things.
So it could be a Brown Act of 2 speak, because there's only 3 of us.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
Normally there's 5.
by bringing this to as a discussion item, I think that was the intent, was that by bringing this up as a discussion item and a publicly noticed meeting, opinions could be gathered, information could be shared, and then that all brought back with an individual, a meeting with the 2 council members who are appointed to investigate this option. So.
I'd like to suggest that as the head of planning, you talk to the city council and have them listen to what happened here tonight. It's recorded, right?
Yes, it is. I've been told that there's people watching too, so that's good.
Good.
And there will be a report. I believe there will be a report. I'm bringing back a recommendation. I believe it's a little unclear to me now as to whether or not it's going to be a couple of council members bringing a recommendation back to the larger council, or whether there's a summary report from this action taken tonight. I'm thinking there's a summary report. So.
And so what do I do?
You will be contacted, and you will meet with the
Okay.
designated council members who are forming this informal subcommittee.
Okay, and this is going to be before they see your staff report.
I would imagine that it would have to be very soon. At least I would hope that if they plan to act on this very soon, they should be reaching out to you very soon.
Okay.
To do that.
Thank you.
In your staff report, I assume is going to have the chart that you showed us, the other cities that have I didn't know Carpinteria had a BAR. I mean, that was interesting information. I always thought, I knew Santa Barbara had one, but your chart showed all these other cities
Thank
that
you.
have it.
I
That's
did, I mean,
amazing.
it was just a
AG has
rough,
one.
couple of hours calling
Oh,
my
yeah.
colleagues to say, what do you do and how do you do it? And, how much, and by the way, how much do you charge for a sign review?
On that subject, back when we all went to the Planning Commissioners Academy, which was 4 years ago, about, I did meet a lot of people from other cities, and I did talk to them about what they were doing. At that point in time, I don't think we had yet had a Planning Commission meeting that year. It was early in the year. And they were all, what do you guys do? Well, what do you guys do? Tell me about how your commission performs. Well, some of them did indeed have combined boards. And they said it was horrible because the meetings were really long and a lot of them had to meet more than once a month just to get through the agenda. And if something had to get delayed until 2 weeks later, it just delays, getting projects approved and permitted and even signed. So it was highly recommended that, city not set themselves up like that.
I will remind council and planning commission and the public that we have a large budget item in my budget to update the design guidelines. I have not run an RFP yet for that, for the consultants to assist us in that, and that would include looking at the sign ordinance, doing some community outreach, meeting collectively to talk about what needs to be changed, what we value. That's all a series of community meetings and public meetings with business communities and with stakeholders. And I just need to have direction from council to begin that process, to find there's some very skilled firms out there that would love to work with Solvang to envision how they may want to freshen their brand up and that kind of thing, and look at our sign ordinance and look for efficiencies. But I await directions from council to take that action.
Well, that's certainly another reason why we shouldn't jump to doing this anytime soon. I mean, it would seem to me that you would want to wait for the results of all of that before you made any changes. Are there any remarks from staff at this point?
And for me, Brenda, do you have any remarks at all?
She can't talk.
I know, she's been.
And my only comment was going to be ask, when are we getting on this? There's a lot of people that complain to us because we are on this board about when are we going to get on the design guidelines, look at them, freshen them up, update them, see where we're at, and part of that, of course, is the sign ordinance and some efficiencies that we really do need to look at and see how we can do it. So it's good to hear that we have the money in the budget. I didn't even think that it was going to be that big of a process. I was just wanting to get going on some more efficiency things with signs and stuff like that. But if we've got to do the whole element, we do the whole element. That's fine.
I've been given some direction that the sign ordinance needs to be looked at again, and that was from council. But I also reminded council quite recently that would be the time to naturally do that.
Gotcha. Sure.
Our community design element, as much as it's unique and valuable to us, it is from 1988.
Mm-hmm.
It could use some revisiting.
I'd like to
Standardize it a little bit more. Sign ordinance. I mean, we want all the colors and we want that subjectivity and those things, but give as Lorraine said and Brian said, give the clients a little more and staff a little more. This is how it is.
I think it's something the city council should consider seriously. We've talked about this for 2 or 3 years now, and we're always going to do it, but it never happens. Right. And I don't know, can the planning commission on its own just start and do it? Or do we have to have direction from city council?
You pretty much need direction.
Yes.
I mean,
So-
that can be part of your recommendation that you bring back to the city council members who are evaluating this potential merger.
Part of our
Is
recommendation
is
that
to
we would
Agree.
like
is to move ahead with the
Yes.
with
Move
the
ahead.
running
Guidelines and-
with releasing the
Sorry.
RFP. We, as I said, there are a number of talented firms out there who would be happy to work with us, give us what we want, take us through this process, and help us identify what we value and what we can refresh.
Yeah, and in support of that recommendation, I think going through that process, we can potentially find some efficiencies and save money for everybody involved. That would be the point, exactly. Okay, if there's nothing else. Adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good.